great. Pennsylvania, and they're all going to be there.
Isn't it neat?
Yeah, it's very
It's a
neat.
neat thing.
Very, very
Okay, and
wonderful.
everything seems to be working
Yeah.
for that. Oh, okay, I want to make sure.
It's great. That's my better half.
Yeah, that's really fun, ain't it?
Yeah. Give them a doggy biscuit and get them quiet, Ralph.
All right. Seems like they're getting here.
Okay, that sounds great.
Huh? I know. Thank goodness. Do you think we should turn off all the lights, or do you think it makes a difference for the video part? Yeah. Let's see what it looks like. Oh, you guys there are handouts. Hi, how are you? Oh, wave here.
Oh, wait here.
Yes.
Hi,
This is
Lynn.
Helene.
Hi. How are you?
It's so wonderful to meet you.
Oh, it's wonderful to be able to do this, isn't it?
Okay.
Oh,
Okay. Are you having this?
I will, yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. All right. Okay, great. Because I was like, I'm supposed to start
Yeah, I
doing
just
this
wrote
video.
this.
Perfect. That's fine. Okay, we'll talk in a minute.
okay, that's fine.
Okay.
If I could get rid of this part at the bottom. Yeah, that's better. What do you think? Should we get started? Yeah. Huh? What? Do you think we should go ahead? Should we wait or go ahead? Okay, we're gonna wait about 2 minutes.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm just hanging out. That's fine.
get started with our Skype session with Lynne Dorfman. In a minute, I will turn the webcam around so that she can see the class while she's talking. If you don't have the two handouts, they're up here on the front table. Lynne is going to talk to us and go through several lessons with us, and at the conclusion of the session today, she'll be able to take questions from you as well. And I wanted to do a little brief introduction. This is
Before you start,
yeah.
this is Betsy Woods.
Oh, I guess I should have introduced myself.
If you don't know who she is, but she is our tech guru. She's our tech coordinator, actually, but we like to call her.
Yeah, Gary is a good one. Even though, and Lynn and I have practiced this Skype session once, and I have a feeling it's going to go well. If the call drops, she'll just call us back, right, Lynn?
That's right.
All right.
Absolutely.
I'm going to turn your room volume up just a little bit. Okay. All right. So a brief introduction about Lynn. She is the co-author of Mentor Text, Poetry Mentor Text, and Nonfiction Mentor Text. Lynn has 38 years experience in the Upper Moreland School District as a teacher, writing coach, and reading specialist. She's the co-director of the Pennsylvania Writing and Literature Project and currently works as an educational consultant. She plays guitar, right, Lynn?
Yes, I do.
And she has 2 Welsh corgis.
Three.
Three.
Three Welsh corgis.
For the fun facts about her. If you want to learn more about Lynn after the session or her co-author Rose Capelli, you in their books, you can look on their website. It's mentortextswithlynnandrose.com, or you could go to the Stenhouse publishing website, and you can find all the information there as well. And she's on Twitter. We just started following you yesterday, the OWP Twitter. So if you would please welcome Lynne Dorfman and give her a round of applause, and I'll turn the webcam around so she can see.
Thank you, Betsy.
You're welcome.
Oh, hi, everybody. It's so great to see all of you. Hi. This is really great, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's so much fun. We can do this across the country, across the world. Wow, it's just so exciting. But I'm very glad to be here today with you in Ohio. And I want to tell you, too, that if after the Skyping is over, if any of you have questions, you can also email me. I'm going to give you my email address and you can write that down. It's not on, oh, it is on the handout. The one handout that you have, nonfiction mentor text, crafting effective introductions and conclusions. Lynne Dorfman at Comcast.net. And if you just put in your line, Ohio Writing Project, I will know it's you, and I will try to answer any questions that you might have. But feel free to stop me at any point in time and ask questions. And I'm going to give you time to write today, to turn and talk, and also to ask me questions. And yes, I have had a wonderful 38-year career with the Upper Moreland School District. This past year, I continued to go into classrooms. Actually, I went back to my own district for about 40 days. And I also had the opportunity to spend about 25 days in Bristol School District. I was in Methacton, Waldron Mercy. So I really got to see a lot of teachers, work with teachers, model writing lessons mainly, and just kind of process out how did it go? And what did they see that they thought they could do in their own classrooms? So just love working with teachers. Rose and I do spend some time going to conferences. This past year, we participated in a wonderful conference at the IRA conference, International Reading Association conference in San Antonio. And we were part of a writing institute, which was very, very wonderful. We were there with people like Ralph Letcher and Georgia Hurd. So we were very happy to be part of that institute, and we've actually been asked back. Dr. Gansky is writing another one. So we're very excited. We are writing a book, chapters of a book that will be published by the International Reading Association in 2014, July 2014. is the target date. And every single author who participated in the Writing Institute is doing a chapter. So Rose and I are writing a chapter on mentor text. I do want to tell you just a little bit about how these books came to be. I have always loved writing ever since I can remember. I was always in trouble growing up, so I was sent to my room often, and that is how I learned to play guitar. My grandparents took pity on me and bought me a guitar, and I learned the chords and I played a lot of folk songs. I grew up in the days of Peter, Paul, and Mary, so I was sitting there singing Blowing in the Wind and the Times They Are Changing. But then I started to write my own songs, and I love to write stories. So I spent time doing that too. And when I started teaching school, I always loved writing, but I don't think I did anything really terribly wrong. At least I hope not to the first several years I taught, but there was something missing. And I knew it, but I didn't know what until I found the Pennsylvania Writing and Literature Project. And when I went to the writing project, it really changed my life in so many ways. I think one big way it changed my life is I began to read professionally about the teaching of reading and writing. And I will be truthful, I think for the first 10 years of my career, I really did not do that. When I came to the writing project, I realized how much I didn't know about the teaching of writing. And so I became very involved with the project. And I think the true meaning of writing workshop and how conferences should go and what that really looked like, really honoring the writer and letting the writer retain ownership of his or her work. All of that I learned through the project. And the neat thing about the writing project, of course, I don't have to tell you, is the K through 12 community and beyond. Something that very often we don't get in our schools. We tend to cluster around grade levels or even buildings. I know sometimes we all get together, but it's rare. And that camaraderie and that spirit of networking with the project was very important to me. So, and continues to be important to me and sustains me professionally and also gives me gentle nudges to grow in many different ways. So I'm a real writing project fan, and I applaud all of you for being there this summer and working together to be better teachers, because that's what it's really all about for us to always reflect on literary practice and try to be the best that we can be. Uh, when we when Rose and I first met, it was because I actually, when I first called Rose to take a job with the writing project and teach a course, she was reluctant, but I wouldn't give up. So I ended up talking her into teaching for the writing project, and she ended up teaching a course with me, writing in children's literature. And we taught it for several years. People kept saying to us, the textbook doesn't seem to match. And it was true. Rose and I could not find a textbook that matched what we did. So everybody kept saying, why don't you write the book? Why don't you write it? And we had a lot of encouragement. We were very lucky. We met Bill Varner, our editor, our Stenhouse editor, at a conference. He came to actually watch us present. And he had a little conference with us and he said, this is what you need to do. And so we tried it out. And we found that Bill was a wonderful editor. His biggest encouragement and words of wisdom, I think, he said, let me be the editor. You have the ideas, you write them down, and then we'll go from there. But I can't give you the ideas. They're in your head. So just spill them out and stop editing. Don't edit. Don't decide what should go in or go out of this book. Let me decide that. And that was very freeing for Rose and me. We're a good team because I'm very right brained and Rose is very left brained. And together we are whole brained. So we've been friends now for a long, long time. We actually taught that course for 12 years. And in the process of writing mentor text, we knew there was another book, one on nonfiction. And so we began the process of writing that book fairly. It was just a short while after finishing mentor texts. Then we wanted to do the wonderful work of making reading writing connections through poetry. So we wrote that third book and just loved doing it. We dedicated it to our editor. And now I'm off on a new adventure. Rose wanted a break. So I'm writing with my friend Diane Doherty, who, by the way, uh, co chaired the Writing Institute with me for about 5 years. I worked with her as a co director for the Summer Invitational Writing Institute. So we've known each other. We actually took our Writing Institute together. So we're teaming up to write a book on embedding the teaching of grammar for elementary school teachers K through 5. Well, actually, K through 6 is what we're really covering. And we're doing it through narrative, informational writing, and opinion writing, but we're actually embedding grammar throughout the units of study. And that's what we're trying to show teachers how to do. We will continue to use the Your Turn lesson, and there will be a treasure chest, but I'm actually working all through the summer. And the only way to really write a book is to treat it somewhat like a job. You have to have a certain amount of time that you're going to sit your bottom right down in a chair and write. And I think it's important to know when you're really good at writing. What is your best time in the day? For me, it's in the morning. And so whenever I can snatch first thing in the morning writing, I'm really great in the morning. I accomplish at least double the amount between the hours of 6:30 in the morning to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Then after that, my energy kind of breaks up a little bit. I need to go and take a walk or read a book, play with my dogs, go out into the garden. I love to plant flowers and cut fresh flowers and bring them in the house. So you need that kind of break. I am not really great in the evening anymore. When I was in my 20s, I could pull all nighters. I can't do that anymore. And so you have to know yourself and know when it's a good time for you to write and where. You have to find those favorite spots that you can really accomplish a lot in writing. Now, in order to write a book, like any of the books that we've written, we had to spend hours and hours in the classrooms to gather classroom snapshots because I think it's important to make these professional books very real for teachers. So we were in the classroom this year right up until almost the very last day. School just finished about a week or so ago, and we were in the classrooms up to that point in time. I had great. Anybody a kindergarten teacher out there? Or no kindergarten? Do you have any kindergarten teachers? What about first grade,
Yeah.
second grade? I spent a lot of time. It's not where I usually am, but I spent a lot of time in the primary grades, and kindergarten is the best kept secret ever. Really, I cannot believe that when I said turn and talk, and these writers, and believe me, these kindergarten kids thought they were writers. They turned and talked about their work. They were very serious and very professional. And I can't believe the writing samples. I can't believe it, and I was there. I cannot believe the writing samples I have from kindergarten. I usually work primarily with third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. I'm That's my span from about third grade through middle school. But primary grades, oh my goodness gracious, I have wonderful, wonderful writing samples for this new book. Um, I'm going to start out by having you all look at that establishing a writing identity. And it's just one single page. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that I believe that we have to do. And they may not all be on order here, but I'm going to talk to you about some of them. The first thing I want to talk to you about is always, always, when you're in a classroom, anytime you have a chance to call your students writers, do that. So when I'm in writing workshop, I will often say, writers, let's gather on the rug today. We have some serious work to do. We are going to study nonfiction leads. We're going to look at some nonfiction books and see how those writers hook their readers to continue to read their book. And so I will call them writers in conference when it's time to return from the rug to their chairs. I will call them writers again. Even with the older grades, I still refer to them as writers because I want to very consciously elevate them to the status of I am a writer. And I think they need to hear that over and over and over again. So I call them writers as often as I can. Now, I am sure that you all have one of these, but I have one of my favorite writing notebooks right here I'm holding up. I like ones that are about this size. And really, for your kids in your classroom, you know that if you're in the primary grades, you probably need something bigger than this. But for the older kids, they really can do with something that is smaller. And I love a book that is a spiral because I love to open it up and let it sit flat so that I can really enjoy it and read it and not worry about pages turning back on me. Now, a writer's notebook, I think, is the lifeline to the work that kids do in the classroom as writers and real writers. I'm always writing in my writer's notebook, and I could kick myself the times that I don't have a writer's notebook with me and I see something that I really need to write down. Because as much as you think you're going to remember it, chances are you won't. So it's so important to have a writer's notebook. Also, the writer's notebook or the writing journal, if you want to call it a journal, that's not really a problem. Uh, the important thing is that you give students a chance to write daily, and that the writer's notebook is a place where kids can exercise their dendrites, their writing dendrites. They can build writing muscles. They need to build stamina for the longer work, the larger work, the more difficult projects. So, writing in a writer's notebook for me is often just a short burst where I can practice being a writer. And some of the things that I do in my writer's notebook that I encourage kids to do is things like make lists. So I'm going to show you on this page, for example, this is a page where I have at the top books. The book is Names for Snow by Judy K. Beach. Now, I read this wonderful picture book where all Judy Beach did was she renamed snow over and over again. So in November, she called snow welcome because, after all, we haven't seen it for a long, long time. So when it first arrives in November, we call it welcome. I think in December, she called it magician because it changed the landscape and made things disappear. So she had all these names for snow. And I thought to myself, could I do this? So I wrote in my writer's notebook, I would call autumn gatherer. leaf dropper, artist, painter, best dressed gal, masquerader, harvest queen, party girl, leaf dancer. And then I have a little graphic organizer here at the bottom. On the next page, I wrote a haiku off the list. I do that a lot. On this page, it's loaded with words and phrases from Ken Robbins' book called Autumn Leaves. And I added my own thinking to this page. But the neat thing about it is when you read carefully, there's sometimes something that stands out to you that becomes part of your writing that you never would have had you not noticed something somewhere else. So, for example, I noticed in this book that the yellow poplar, which is also called the tulip tree, when the leaves drop onto the sidewalk, when you look down at them, the leaves look like the back of a frog if it's flattened on the ground. So the best haiku that I wrote out of writing about 5 or 6 different ones off of these words, as far as I'm concerned, is this one. Yellow poplar drops her leaves on the wet sidewalk, silhouettes of frogs. Now, I never would have written that haiku had it not been for paying attention and writing something down in my writer's notebook. The other thing I love to do is heart maps. Do you know what a heart map is?
Yes.
Yeah. So here is a heart map, but this heart map is of an author, Linda Oatman High, someone that I study and I read a lot of her picture books. And so I tried to create a heart map after reading all of her books. What would be in Linda Oatman High's heart? And I have at the center here family and mentors and mentoring because a lot of her books, like Winter Shoes for Willie, it's about a father and a son learning to be a blacksmith, or Beekeepers, a granddaughter with her grandfather who is a beekeeper. A lot of it's about mentors and mentoring. I also have farms and farm life, animals, especially horses, ties with older generations, cross generational, simplicity, places in Pennsylvania. So I have what is in her heart. In my classrooms, very often I will give a group of kids a stack of picture books all by an author. They get to choose, they walk around and they pick a place where they want to sit down. So maybe a bunch of them sit down with Cynthia Ryland books, or maybe a bunch of them sit down with Dr. Seuss books, whatever it is, Eve Bunting books. And then they share and they talk about the books and they try to do a heart map for that author, which we display. So that's another way of really developing your writer's identity and thinking about other writers and what do they write about and could I write about that too. Now, one thing we're going to try out right now is we're going to try to create an expert list. I love expert lists. I call them very often, Rose and I actually like to call them authority lists. And the reason why we call them authority lists is because we like to emphasize the word author is in authority. So you're going to try this out. I would have students of all ages actually keep an expert list. And when I say an expert list, what I mean is I want you to think right now about areas that you are really interested in. Now, when I say expert, I don't certainly mean that you need to know every single thing about that area. But I want you to think about things that you're very interested in, that you know some things about, and that you might want to know a lot more. For example, in my expert list, I would include, first of all, big area of expertise for me. I know a lot about this horses. I started riding when I was 9 years old. By the time I was 14, I was teaching horseback riding right or wrong, I was standing there as a 14-year-old giving riding lessons. I coached horseback riding until I was about 42 years old. And I had so much experience, life experience with horses. It's a big area on my authority list. Another area would be, I think, being a big sister. I have two younger sisters. My mom became ill when my youngest sister was still in high school, and I think I was a really great big sister in many ways. I really learned how to um, be a big sister. Growing up, I did a good job with that. So I could write a lot of stories about being a big sister. I also love to garden. I'm not an expert there. I need lots of help. I'm still planting things that grow really tall in the front. And then in the back, there are really short things. And of course, when you're looking at them, that's not the way you want to do it. I also still need to get the hang of planting flowers that will bloom continuously so that my garden is staggered so that I have things starting to bloom in early spring and takes me through late fall. So I'm getting the hang of that, but I'm finding that I need to do a lot more reading. But I put that on my expertise list because I'm really interested in that. I am a godmother, and I have two wonderful goddaughters. They're twins. And of course, their younger sister too is very important to me. So I'm a kind of adopted grandmother too, because the girls don't have any grandparents. So I would put that on my expertise list. An expert at being a godmother. I'm an expert at teaching reading and an expert at teaching writing. However, there's still, believe me, a lot more to learn. I When I decide that I know it all, then that's when I should really give up and hang it up, because I don't think you ever stop learning. So I'm putting it on my expert list. I'm an expert at teaching reading and writing, but again, there's still lots to learn. I think I'm a little mini expert on whales. I love whales. I've read a lot about whales and I've gone on a lot of whale watches. Now, what I want you to do, I could go on, but I want you to do a quick brainstorm list. Try to come up with 10 areas of expertise. It can be anything from I'm an expert at shopping. I am an expert shopper. I know how to shop. Some of you may be experts in an area of sports, such as soccer or baseball. Sitting there, maybe one of you is a party planner. You know how to plan events, plan parties. So I want you to think for a minute. I'm going to give you about 3, 4 minutes to write a list. Then don't do it. Yeah. Oh no, can't, because that fence is always broken in the back. All right. Anybody there a baker? Good in the kitchen? A grill master? Okay, now before you share, I want you to stop writing for a minute. Before you share, now this is what I want you to do. I want you to take that expert list, which, by the way, when you have a writer's notebook, this one actually I didn't organize that way, but my most recent ones, I organize all my lists. I start in the back of my writer's notebooks. And so if I'm doing a heart map, an expert list, a memory chain, any kind of list, the sounds and smells of Christmas, I always do all my listing and all my finding a topic in the back to the middle, and then everything else from the front to the middle. And so eventually my notebooks meet somewhere halfway. But I like to start my list in the back because then I can always find them. Now, if you're doing an expert list or if you're having kids do an expert list, I always have them leave an extra page because I'm hoping that they keep returning to some of their lists over and over again and adding to them. So, an expert list is something that they can add to all year, and it's something you could go back to as well. Now, what I want you to do now, though, is I want you to take a look at that list. And I want you to, after I model, I want you to take one item from that list and redefine it for specificity. And this is what I mean. As writers, we usually have 4 or 5 really big writing territories. They're huge. They are wells that you can continue to dip into and you can continue to draw from. Most writers have as an area of expertise, a big writing territory. Their family, family and friends are a huge, huge area that we all can return to and write about. But if we're nonfiction writers, we may have another area that is really important to us that we want to learn more about. Um, and perhaps, for example, Stephen Swinburne is a great nonfiction author, and he often writes about different kinds of animals. And he actually goes to the habitats and he studies them and he writes about them. We all have our areas of interest and our areas of expertise, but some of them we can go back to many times. So let me show you how to redefine an area for expertise and specificity. Let me take horses because that's a big area for me. So if I'm sitting down today with you and I decide, okay, I'm going to write about horses. If that's what I do when I start to write, I don't have a really great plan to really sustain writing because my territory is so huge, I can't wrap my arms around it. This often happens to students of all ages. Even when you write a doctoral dissertation, it's a killer unless you are able to really zoom in on what it is exactly that you want to study and what are your 1 or 2 focus questions that you hope to answer in your dissertation. So it applies no matter what kind of writing you're really doing. If I were writing about horses today, I might say, okay, I could write a good piece, informational piece, a how-to piece on grooming a horse. So I'll write under horses, grooming a horse, how to groom a horse. And I could think about that and I could say to myself, gee, as I write this piece, every time I talk about a particular brush, a curry comb, a body brush, a hard dandy, a soft dandy, a hoof pick, a rub rag, I could draw a picture of it and label it. Now, I could also do another procedural piece on how to correctly put on a saddle, an English saddle. I could also write a compare contrast piece on the differences between Western style riding and English style riding. I could write an opinion piece why I believe riding horses is a true team sport. I could write a narrative about my very first riding lesson and what happened during that very first riding lesson when I rode a pony named Oswald. I could actually go back to my writer's notebook and just write a descriptive paragraph on my riding instructor, Mick Wormington, or my pony, Oswald. I could write a pretty scary story about the time we took a midnight trail ride to Valley Forge Park. I could do a top tens list, the top 10 reasons you should let your child take horseback riding lessons. Now, I'm going to stop there. I could keep going. But now that I've modeled, what I'd like you to do is take one area off your list and redefine it the way I just redefined horses for specificity. See if you can get 7 or 8 writing ideas from this area of expertise. I'm going to give you about 3, 4 minutes, and then I'm going to ask you to turn and talk and share. Okay, I'm going to ask you to stop your writing, bring that to a close, and turn and talk for a few minutes about your expert list and your redefining for specificity with someone close to you. I'm going to give you just a few minutes to turn and talk with someone close to you. could find me on the bottom shelf, the very bottom shelf, yeah, on this side, Frogs by Anne Heinrichs. If you can find me that book, that'd be good. Okay, okay, okay. All right, see if you can find me Frogs by Anne Heinrichs. Nevis doesn't know what you're doing. Okay, everybody, I'm going to call you back. Can we all wrap up and we're going to get started again? There are a lot of turning and talking there. I hope you all came up with some great ideas that would be fodder for your own writer's notebook. But this is a great idea to do with kids. And it really helps them to zoom in on a topic to write about. Now, another thing that I didn't have in your packet, but what I usually do is I draw on a chart paper or on the board a big inverted triangle. And you can see a picture of this in our book, Mentor Texts. We have a big inverted triangle. And at the top of that triangle is where I place um, my writing territory. So, for example, let's say at the top of my writing territory, at the top of the triangle, I write outdoor fun. Then I draw a line under it. Now, outdoor fun is a big territory to write about. So I think, what kind of outdoor fun do I want to write about today? So I might write camping, but so I write camping. Then I have to think, well, I had camping experiences with the Girl Scouts and with my grandparents. Well, today, going down the triangle, I write underneath camping. My next thing would be camping with Girl Scouts. G, capital G, period, capital S, period. And then finally, when I get to the very point, I'm going to have to write across and outside that triangle because I won't have enough room. Because as I define for specificity, it usually gets larger. So I'm going to have to write the time the raccoons invaded the trash and we thought we were going to be eaten by bears. So as you can see, I went from the big territory was outdoor fun. But by the time I zoomed in, I know that today in writing workshop, I'm going to write about that experience where I am writing about camping out with the Girl Scouts, the time that the raccoons invaded the trash, and what ensued from that. So it's important that you do that. Let me give you another example. So I have this big triangle, and at the top I might write family. Then maybe today I want to write about my sisters, something that I did with my sisters. And then maybe I redefine again and say, I'm going to write about a story about my little sister Diane and me because we hung out together all the time. And I have a lot of Diane stories. So maybe I'm going to write about the time we rode our bikes to the the agricultural center, for a paper bag picnic and didn't tell our mom where we were going. So that's actually a trouble story for my many children. But that's the way I teach kids to. You start out with a big territory, but you have to keep redefining it for specificity until you can get to a place where you really feel comfortable and you know that you can really write about that. Now, on your list, on this list that you have, um, if you look down to number 15, I just want to talk just a little bit about that one, understanding how we problem solve. And I just want to make sure that I say that, and I'm sure you know this, but writing is a very social activity. Very often, people think of it as an isolated activity, but it really is not. Writing and reading floats on a sea of talk. They float on a sea of talk, and you need to give students time when they're reading things or when they're writing things to actually be able to stop and talk about it. Now, in writing workshop, a lot of times we save that last 5 minutes or so for reflection. And as we go through the gradual release of responsibility model, which is in your other packet on the third page, well, it actually says page 2, your turn lesson format. If you look and you can see the your turn lesson format, that's really just Lev Vygotsky. That's what Rigi Routman calls the optimal learning model. Founders and Pinnell also have a model that looks very similar to this. And really, our Your Turn lesson is based on the idea of simply I do, we do, you do. Even important for older students is the idea of the shared or guided writing experience, where we give kids time to really think about whatever it is we're trying to teach them together or as an entire class. So when I'm working on a good beginning for a narrative, for example, we'll write one as a class. Maybe we'll write two. It depends where the class is and how much they need. Sometimes some kids are ready to go back and get started before others. So sometimes I'll say if anyone needs to hang back on the rug and think some more with me, you can do that. And I send the rest of the kids back to begin their independent writing. Sometimes you only need an extra guided conversation with your a few of your students to really get them ready to write. But I have found that I am always much more successful when I have the shared and or guided experience. When I first started teaching, this was a big flaw, I think, for my teaching. I did a lot of modeling, which is extremely important, but I went from the I do to the you do. And then I was often disappointed. Why couldn't they do it? So when you really want them to get something, you need those shared and guided experiences, even for your older kids. Um, the modeling, of course, that is important. And we always model with a piece of literature, but also with our own writing. I believe, and I know Rose would tell you the same thing, that writing is not a spectator sport. You have to jump in and play the game. So if you are a teacher of writers, and you all are, then you have to be a teacher who writes. Because a teacher of writers is a teacher who writes. And when you write, you will be better at conferring, giving feedback, because you will be engaging in the same struggles that your writers are engaging in. So as you struggle, you learn and you think about how you problem solve. Now, thinking about that number 15, understanding how we problem solve. In a classroom of writers, a writing community, we want our students to notice and appropriate the writing behaviors of others. If we don't give our students a chance to turn and talk about how they've problem solved, how they figured things out, the strategies that they've used, then each and every writer, if your kids are writing as individuals only and never listening to how others are using strategies, and this is the whole idea of mentor text too. We need to notice what others are doing, including the authors themselves, and we need to appropriate those behaviors, make them our own, make them our own fingerprints. And when there are fingerprints, then we know that the students own them. One great way to appropriate behavior is to study the authors, to have mentor text, and allow those mentor texts to provide gentle nudges so that your students write differently tomorrow. than they are writing today. See, if kids always play it safe, if they stick to what they know, but they're not willing to budge and move on to new things and try out new things, their writing doesn't change that much. Writing needs to grow in levels of sophistication and complexity. In order to do that, you need to take risks, responsible risks, and mentor text will help, as well as listening in to your fellow writers, the peers that you have in your classroom. How many of you have ever tried a memory chain? Do you know what a memory chain is?
No, don't.
No?
No.
All right, we'll just try one more. We're going to try one more thing in our writer's notebook. And I want to show you a memory chain. I'll hold one up, but then I will do one for you verbally because I didn't send you one. This is what a memory chain looks like. I don't know if you can see that, but what I'm doing here is I'm just writing down whatever comes to mind, starting with, and here are some things you can start with. To do a memory chain, the idea of a memory chain is to give you topics to write about. So a memory chain can start with a season of the year, can start with a month, a day of the week. It could start with a holiday. A memory chain could start with a favorite person or could start with a favorite place. Those are all ideas, or could start with an object in the room. Now, the idea of a memory chain, and by the way, I don't do these with primary students, but I do them often to get myself started writing. I introduced this in the second half of third grade. This works very well with second half third grade. Fourth graders can do them well, fifth graders, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and beyond. So on this memory chain, I wrote down fall. And then that made me think of my grandfather raking huge piles of leaves on his lawn in Coopersburg, but I just wrote grandfather raking leaves. And then that made me think of Pixie and Lady, my dogs, diving into those piles of leaves with me. And that made me think of another dog I had, Chimney Sweep. And that made me think of the day I brought home a little black lab from the barn, and we called her Sheba. And that made me think of the time that Sheba came to get me while I was in my room playing records, and my father was locked out. And it was kind of a Lassie kind of story, like, you've got to come down the steps and follow me. And my father being locked out made me think of the time that I had just bought a new car. Actually, it was junker. It was about 12 years old. I bought it with my own money. I was in college and I was at the mall with my friends right before Christmas. Everybody was shopping. And I came out of the mall, went to the wrong car, and just proceeded to be very adamant about getting my key into someone else's lock. Oh yeah, I got the key in before my other friend who was peering in the car and saying, "Doesn't your car have blue interior?" And I'm answering her, "Yes." "And doesn't your car have bucket seats?" I answer her again, "Yes." "And doesn't your car have a console on the floor? The stick shifts on the floor?" I said, "Yes." "Well, this car is maroon inside and it doesn't have buckets." I'm like dying. I already had the key in the lock. Well, people are pouring out of the mall because there was a power outage. And I am thinking, how am I ever going to explain? I'm going to end up in jail. So finally, the long and the short of it, I did get the key out of the lock, but that would be a funny story that I could tell. That led me to think about my best friend, Wilson McClure, because he worked at the Plymouth Meeting Mall. And then I thought of his mom, who ran horse shows and had a stable. And that made me think of Devon Horse Show. and how I used to groom for Debbie Manning and her jumper Tornado. And that made me think about how I lost my shoe in the mud at Devon Horse Show and just got sucked right off. And then that reminded me of the time in high school when I tried to step up onto the S bus at Broad Colony and somebody stepped on the back of my shoe. And I got on the bus and the bus doors closed and off we went, jam packed. So, as a 15-year-old, try to explain coming home and telling your mom why you have one shoe on and one shoe off. That was a big delight. So that's like a memory chain. So what you need to do is when you're doing a memory chain, whatever comes into your mind, you jot down a few words, just enough that you will remember what it's about. And then you have to say to yourself, and that makes me think of. Now, here's how not to do a memory chain. Whatever comes into your mind, you have to really pop it out and write it down. You can't judge it. You can't say, is this something I should write about or not? Because the minute you start delaying, you've lost that stream of consciousness. So you have to go quickly. So I want you to try it out. Pick a season or a person or a place and see if you can chain and keep chaining for about 3 minutes. Do that right now. And if something doesn't work for you, if the chain doesn't work, then start with something else and try again. Doing this. Goodbye. I can't do this. Okay, now stop wherever you are. And this is what I'd like you to do. I want you to look at your list. Some of the things on your memory chain are going to be just stepping stones. You're not going to be able to write about them, or if you did, it would be a few sentences, or you're not really interested in it. But I want you to look and see, are there any places where you could start and you could say, I could write a poem. I could write a good description here. I could write a story. I could write a letter to someone. I could begin a memoir. I could do some kind of procedural piece or informational piece or even an opinion piece. See if there's a place. Okay, I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to share your memory chain with someone as quickly as you can, and a spot or two. If you find one good idea, it was worth it. One good idea to write about, it's worth it. And remember that a memory chain, if it's not working and you started with small, then start again with a bigger piece, or start again with a smaller piece. everybody. I'm going to pull you back again because I know we're really short of time. I hope that worked well for all of you. It seems to have. All right. I'd like everybody to take a look at your packet, writing project people. I know that was good. I'm glad that you had a lot of ideas to share, and I hope that works out for you. That's my favorite way to find topics to write about. I love memory chaining. It always brings back unexpected bits and pieces of my life. The more you do that, the better you get at it. Now there are lots of different ideas on that sheet, creating a writing identity. And if you have any questions about any of them, you can just email me. Don't be afraid to email me. But I'd like you to turn back to this packet. And on the very back of the first page, there is a page that talks about creating a scene. And we're going to try that out. This was one of, I think it was probably our favorite chapter to write in the nonfiction book, creating introductions and conclusions for informational pieces of writing. And really, the way Rose and I did it is we actually gathered lots of our books, our nonfiction books that we own, and we started to look at them and look at good introductions and how these books actually wrote their conclusions. And we studied them. And the format that we used for studying, are you familiar with Katie Wood Ray and the work of Katie Wood Ray? Great. She's one of my favorite mentors. I have read everything that she's written, and I love Regie Routman too. Writing Essentials, Reading Essentials, Teaching Essentials. I love Regie and the work that she does. I read all of Ralph Fletcher's stuff because he's just great. I was a big fan of Don Graves. He will be dearly missed. He was a giant in the literacy field. Um, but I love Katie Wood Ray. And I have to say that when Rosie and I were teaching writing and children's literature, one of the books that really helped us change our thinking about the teaching of writing forever was Wondrous Words. It's one of her earlier books. I love it. It's like a Bible to me. So when we study something, we start out by noticing something, and then we see if that author does it in other books that he or she has written. And we look and see, are there other authors that also do this? And when we notice something, we often call it something. And if it has a name already, we call it what it's called. But sometimes we have to make up a name. If I have time later on, we're going to try sharing a secret lead. Now, sharing a secret lead is the name that Rose and I gave to what we found. We called it sharing a secret. Sometimes it already has a name, so we use that. We're going to start out by looking at creating a scene. And of course, Rose and I always try it out ourselves, and then we ask our kids to try it out too. So the first book that I want to share with you is this one. We looked at a lot of Gail Gibbons books, and Gail Gibbons in The Honeymakers, Wolves, and Beacons of Light, be lighthouses. In all of those three books, she uses what we call creating a scene. And this book starts out on her very first page. This is what she says: It is a snowy, moonlit night in the northern woods. An animal shakes the snow from its thick fur, throws its head back, and joins its companions in a long howl. The animal is a wolf. Now, how much better than, hello, my name is Alan, and I'm here to tell you about wolves? That's what that's what we get. We get that a lot. But here we're creating a scene. Now she goes on from there to talk to you. I mean, straight informational. The next page says there are two different types of wolves. One is the gray wolf or timber wolf. And then she talks about the gray wolf. And then she goes on to talk about some other kinds. But you notice her lead is to bring you into the book. And she does it by creating that scene where we know where the wolf is. We know it's nighttime in the northern woods. We know it's winter. He's shaking the snow off his thick fur, and we can almost hear that howl. So there's a lot of appeal to the senses in creating a scene. She does it with the honey makers. I didn't bring that book out here, but she does that. It's really cool. And the honey makers, because the first 2 pages of the book are the scene, and then comes the title page. Just like when a movie starts to roll, you start to see the some scenes in action, and then all of a sudden you'll see the title come on a couple minutes later. Well, that's how the honey makers goes. In this book, Beacons of Light, Lighthouses, she again creates a scene. Waves thrash and winds swirl, tossing a ship about in the darkness. Then, in the distance, a light appears. It flashes 3 times and disappears, then flashes again. On board, the ship's crew recognizes that this is a lighthouse signal telling them to veer away from something hidden beneath the water. The captain locates a rocky ledge on the chart and uses the light signal to plot their position. So, again, creating a scene. Many books do that. This is an incredible book about lightning by Stephen Kramer. If you get into the book, and I can show you the table of contents, it's very detailed. I mean, it talks about what makes electrons move in a path. Where do the electrons go? I mean, it's heavy duty expository text. But in the beginning, Stephen Kramer wants to capture readers, young readers, and make them want to read more about lightning. So he has this beautiful page, and this is how he begins by creating a scene. Late in the evening, a dark cloud hangs in the sky. The air is calm. The birds are quiet. Even the blades of dry grass are still. Everything is hushed, waiting. Suddenly, a giant spark leaps through the air, connecting earth and sky. The spark flashes for an instant and disappears. There is a moment of silence. Then a tremendous crack rips through the quiet. Booming echoes follow, rolling across the land. A thunderstorm drifts across the summer sky. Now, right after that, he gets into some heavy duty stuff, but he has brought us right there by his creating a scene. There are many books that do that, and this is another one that really creates a scene, a setting, just with the saguaro cactus dropping its seeds into the ground. This is Cactus Hotel by Brenda Giberson. But I'm going to show you the book, and there's lots of them. I could go on and on. The book that Rose and I used to create this scene that's on your handout is from Frogs by Anne Heinrich. It's a series of books called Nature's Friends. And what we love about this book is there are always really great photographs, one big page spread of photo, and then a short text. So it's great for reading and writing and learning a lot of techniques about writing nonfiction. So the one that we did for you is this one. Here's the picture: How Frogs Eat. The boys love this because it's rather disgusting, and boys just love things like that. So I have to share with you how frogs eat. Stick out your tongue. As you can see, it's attached to the back of your mouth. A frog's tongue is attached to the front of its mouth. It folds up inside the mouth. Along comes a juicy bug. The tongue unfolds in a flash. It shoots out and catches the bug. The tongue is sticky, so the bug sticks to it. Most frogs eat insects. They swallow insects whole. Then their eyes sink in. The frog's eyes help push the food down its throat. Pretty disgusting, right? But the boys love that. And so basically, that is how frogs eat. So here you can see on your page, you can see that you have um, the facts that we pulled out of that. Now, we actually borrowed this technique from Ralph Fletcher. He talks about creating flash straps. This is so great because it helps kids learn also not to plagiarize. So if you're looking at this page with me, you can see that the facts we decided to pull out are: frog's sticky tongue unfolds from the front of its mouth, frog swallows insects whole, and then the frog's eyes sink in and push down the food. So let's say you're writing a report about frogs. So you grab those flash facts. Of course, you know, you're going to have Frogs by Anne Heinrichs in your bibliography if you're writing a report. And here you start out this way: it is quiet near the pond. Frog sits on the edge of the bark, hidden under the wet leaves and twigs. I'm sorry, edge of the bank, hidden under the wet leaves and twigs. If you listen carefully, you can hear the drone of a passing dragonfly. Quick as a wink, Frog's tongue darts out of his mouth like a carpet being unrolled. The dragonfly is trapped on the sticky surface and swallowed whole. Frog's eyes sink into his head. Ah, lunch. Now, again, a much better way than "this is my report about frogs," or "I'm here to tell you about frogs." So, creating that scene and then going into your report about frogs is a really interesting way to begin with kids. And to teach them how to do this also helps them not to plagiarize. Now, if I were with kids that were in first, second, third, fourth grade, we might read that section over and over again, and then I'd let them write down a fact or two, and then we would check back to see are their facts accurate. But as long as the book is open to the page, and as long as young kids are actually reading the text and trying to take notes, they're going to copy. It's very hard. Better to have them read, put the book down. Okay, what did the text say? What was important? Let me try to write it down. And so, gathering these flash facts and then embedding them is a great way to begin to help them not to plagiarize and copy directly from the text. So, we're all going to try it out. And what I'm going to do is I am going to, oh, by the way, I hope you all noticed that we did give credit to Joanne Portalupi and Ralph Fletcher at the top of this page. And this is a great book if you haven't seen it: Nonfiction Craft Lessons and Craft Lessons by Joanne Portalupi and Ralph Fletcher. Joanne is his wife. They're great books to have too on your shelves. So just wanted to give him credit. So this flat idea of flash draft we got from them, but I think it's a great idea. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little book. It's called Hummingbirds, and it is by Julianne Gaiman, who was a friend of ours in the Keystone State Reading Association. And I'm going to read only part of it. I'm going to read some to you, and as I read to you, I want you to think about and write down three or four flash facts. And then what you're going to do with those facts is you are going to create with a partner. You don't have to work, or you can work by yourself, but you're welcome to work with a partner. You're going to create an introduction using creating a scene for an informational piece on hummingbirds. But you have your choice of writing in different voices. So you can write as the hummingbird and be the hummingbird. And that's what Judy Gaiman did, because in her a book, she starts out by saying, "I'm Ruby, a red throated hummingbird." And so she talks in the hummingbird's voice. You can write in the third person, or You can also write in the second person. Now, these are backyard books, and they're great models for kids for writing in the second person. Writing in the second person, although a lot of very formal writing would not be done in the second person, is a great thing to let kids do because it's persona writing, and it almost automatically creates an intense connection with the audience. It's right away you kind of bring them into a piece. So this piece, for example, starts, are you a grasshopper? If you are, your mother looks like this. Your father looks much the same. Your mother laid her eggs at the end of the summer. She laid them deep in the grass just under the ground and covered them in frothy stuff. The froth hardened into a pod to keep the eggs safe. You and your brothers and sisters slept in your eggs all winter, but now it's spring. Time to hatch. Push all together to get out of your pod. You look like a little tiny worm, but that's only because you're wrapped in a worm shaped covering. And then it goes on. This is all written, and you and you're the second person. You can choose the person that you're going to write in first, second, or third. All right, here we go. I'm gonna read some pages and just write down some facts that you intend to embed in your introduction, and then you can write it right here on this page, right after where it says your turn, the facts. You can write them right down, and then on the bottom of the page, write in the scene, or use your writer's notebook if you just want to keep that page clean. All right, so here we go. I'm going to read some facts that I think will be good ones. My book is falling apart here. All right. My wings are not easy to see because I move them so fast when I fly. I can fly backwards and hover like a helicopter. We need lots of sugar water or nectar from flowers. The food gives us energy to keep our wings going 55 to 75 times each second. Our legs and feet are so small we cannot walk on the ground. We sit on thin branches and wires and sing, look at me, tee 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 tee. But we don't want everyone to see us. We have enemies like hawks and frogs and cats. There are other dangers too. Okay. So I gave you some facts. I think you probably all have enough. Um, I could give you one more fact if anybody needs it. We eat more than our body weight each day. So there's another little flash fact for you if you think you need it. Now, you have to think you're creating a scene. So where are you going to see this hummingbird? Turn and talk with your partner. Put your hummingbird somewhere doing something and see if you can embed some of these facts. And we'll try to create a little scene and then we'll share them with the whole group in a few minutes. another minute to finish up? Take another minute and just finish up your final thought. Okay, I'd like each group or individual to find somebody else you didn't share with or turn and talk with, and share your introduction and talk about how it went for you. So find somebody you didn't share with, or if you worked as a partner with a partner, the two of you find another person or two people to share with. Go ahead and do that now. Share with someone else. Okay, I'm going to call you back. We're going to try one more. And this is one of my favorite leads. And I have some student samples that I want to share with you too. So I'd like you to turn to page 3. I think it's numbered as page 3, and it's called Nonfiction Leads. Imagine the Possibilities. Now, in our nonfiction mentor textbook, our chapter does a really, I think, a pretty great job explaining and giving examples of all these different kinds of leads. But the one that I would like to do with you right now is sharing a secret. And I'm holding up a book that I wanted to share with you. This one is called Babe Ruth Saves Baseball, and it is by Frank Murphy. Now, Frank Murphy happens to be a friend of ours, so we started with his books first. He writes a lot of these step into reading books, and he has a picture book about Teddy Roosevelt and how the teddy bear actually was named for Teddy Roosevelt. But this one, Babe Ruth Saves Baseball, begins this way. And it says, almost everyone knows something about George Herman Ruth. You probably know him as Babe. That was his nickname. Babe played for the New York Yankees. He hit hundreds of home runs. Most people think he was baseball's greatest player. But do you know the best thing about Babe Ruth? He saved baseball. He did. Here's how it happened. Now that's the beginning of his book. And if you notice, he tells us things that most people know about Babe Ruth. He starts out by telling us most people know that he was nicknamed Babe, that he played for the New York Yankees, that he hit hundreds of home runs. Most people know that. But the secret that he's sharing in this book, highly focused, he doesn't begin Babe Ruth was born on such and such a date and go to Babe Ruth died on. This is not a biography of Babe Ruth. This is a slice of life. And this is something that's doable for kids. Kids can do this. Very often we ask them to write reports and, write a report on George Washington. It's just, again, way too big. So using him as a good example for many things, writing this slice of life. But this whole book revolves around sharing a secret. Babe Ruth saved baseball. Did you know that? Well, here's how it happened. And that's that whole book. Now he writes another book that is called George Washington and the General's Dog. And I love that book. I don't have that out here, but George Washington and the General's Dog starts the same way. Almost everybody knows that George Washington was our nation's great leader and great hero, that he became the first president, that he was honest. But here's something that most people may not know about George. George Washington loved animals. And then the entire book is that slice of life trying to illustrate that point, focusing on making that point. George Washington loved animals. Now, the great thing about that book is I don't know how many of you grew up with George Washington and the legend of cutting down the cherry tree. I cannot tell a lie. I grew up with that as a kid. That's really legend. It really doesn't have a basis in truth. But Frank's story about George Washington and the General's dog does. And I just to share with you good research for those of you who might be itching to write that picture book or that little chapter book. One thing that Frank loves to do is, find a good story that he can really sink his teeth into. So he very often just spends some time down at the Smithsonian and he wanders around and he looks at artifacts and he sees if he can get a story out of that. He does a lot of reading, watches the news. He's currently writing a story about Jackie Robinson. Sometimes he tracks down people who he can actually interview. But for this particular book, he found this letter that was there at the Smithsonian from George Washington to General Howe. And so it appears that in those days, the generals would take their dogs with them as they went into battle. They had their dogs with them. And General Howe's dog followed the wrong side back. So he ended up in George Washington's camp. Well, when George Washington got the news that this dog was in their camp, he called a truce and he wrote a letter to General Howe, sent a special envoy to General Howe's camp, returning General Howe's dog to him. News of this actually traveled all the way to England, where people who were not really fond of George Washington, you can imagine why, at the time, but they found a new way to respect him because they too, the English, loved their hounds and horses. They loved their animals. And so this is all about that secret that he's sharing. George Washington loved animals. Now, when you study and you find a kind of lead, and by the way, Rose and I again, we decided to call it Sharing a Secret because that's what Frank was doing. We said, well, does anybody else do this? And sure enough, I don't know if you know this book by Laurie Halse Anderson. Thank you, Sarah. It's by Laurie Halse Anderson. It's about the woman who wrote letters and made Thanksgiving actually become a national holiday. So it's the woman who saved Thanksgiving. Now, her tone's a little different. It's a little more sophisticated, but here goes, and a little sarcastic sometimes. You think you know everything about Thanksgiving, don't you? How the Native Americans saved the pilgrims from starving. how the pilgrims held a big feast to celebrate and say thank you. Turkey pie, turkey, pumpkin pie, cranberries, the works. Well, listen up. I have a news flash. We almost lost Thanksgiving. And here you see the father sitting in front of the television set and saying, football canceled today. Oh my goodness. But this is her way of getting started. And then she tells how Thanksgiving was saved. So it's a secret. We almost lost Thanksgiving. Did you know that? Now, she does the same thing in Independent Dames, which is a story of women and girls in the American Revolution. And she says, look, another school play about the heroes of the American Revolution. How sweet. We've got George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Ben Franklin, and Thomas Paine. Famous guys who did important things. Wonderful, period. Wonderful, period. Of course, you're missing part of the story. In fact, you're missing half of it. Hello? How about the women? What about the girls? They wanted a free country too. They worked, they argued, they fought, and they suffered just like the men and the boys. They didn't teach you this yet? Listen up. So there she's sharing a secret. Now, as with anything, we have the kids try it out. And we first tried it out. I shared a secret about myself with the kids and wrote a whole piece about it. And then the kids wrote secrets about themselves and made a list. And I'm going to ask you to do that in a minute. But right now, I'm going to share with you a funny, just because I think you deserve to hear a very amusing piece. We had fourth graders write secrets about themselves and talk about it. And then we had them write about a picture book biography person that they had read. And so, my secret that I shared first, and I'll just read my opening paragraph to you. Most people know that Dr. Dorfman is an elementary school teacher and a writing coach. Most people know that she loves horses and she loves to write stories and poetry. There is one thing about her that many people do not know. Dr. Dorfman almost gave up teaching to run a boarding stable. And then I tell the story, and of course, I didn't do that. And so at the end, I say, and my wrapping conclusion, which is a bookend, Dr. Dorfman chose to stay in teaching. She could not let go of her classroom, her teaching career, and her dream of writing books for children. So she gave up the horses. Yes, she misses them, but she knows that she made the right choice. And that frames the entire piece that I wrote and I shared with kids. All right, so then they shared lots of great secrets. I think one of my most favorite secret was um, when Emily shared about putting ketchup on everything. That she, including, oh my gosh, chocolate cake. And as she tells her story about her addiction to ketchup, within her piece, she tells about how when she got older, she started to notice as a fourth and fifth grader that people were staring at her in restaurants and whispering. And she was at the age and stage where she started to get embarrassed by it. So she has curtailed her ketchup fetish to just eating everything with ketchup at home. But when she goes out, she refrains from putting ketchup all over everything, including her desserts. Now, I must share with you where we're going to try out just writing a lead for a secret about yourself that you might want to share with someone in your writing institute or with your kids. But before you do this, let me share Patrick Mertz's secret about Norman Rockwell. So he had read about Norman Rockwell, and all the kids were asked to find a secret. Now, of course, their secrets sometimes are things that we know, but to them it's a big secret. Like Lexi found out that William Penn had spent numerous years in jail in the Tower of London because of his beliefs. And for Lexi, who was studying about William Penn being the founder of our colony in our state of Pennsylvania, she couldn't believe that he had been thrown into jail. So for her, that was a big secret to share. This is what Patrick shared. Many people know that Norman Rockwell was one of the best artists in the world, and most of his paintings were everywhere on stamps, on posters, calendars, and even magazine covers. His art was studied by students in school, but most people do not know that Norman had three wives: Irina Connor, Mary Barstow, and Molly Punderson. His first wife, Irene, he divorced because things weren't working out. She loved to play, but Norman loved to work. His second wife, Mary, died in his midlife, whispering parentheses, that wasn't his fault. Mary read Dickens or Austen, again, whispering parentheses, famous authors, because he thought we wouldn't know that, to him while he worked. And his last wife, Molly, she was a retired English teacher, and she died 7 years after his death in 1978. She met him when Norman decided to take her class on poetry. They got married and traveled the world. This is how he ends it. If you ask me, Norman Rockwell was quite a ladies' man. He married 3 times, certainly more than most. And then he has in all caps, shh, exclamation mark. Keep this information under your hat. That was his secret. Yes, Patrick. I'll never forget his piece on Norman Rockwell. So the first thing I want to ask you to do is make a list, brainstorm some secrets about yourself, some things that people may not know about you, or some things, and it can be a lot of things. Like um, one of the fifth graders shared that she couldn't go anywhere without taking her teddy bear. If it was going to be a long trip and she was going to be gone for a week or two, she packed her teddy bear because she couldn't sleep without it. Some of you may have a secret. Maybe you have a special activity. Maybe you sing in a band. Like we have John Domenico who shared his secret. He's a third grade teacher, but he plays drums for a band on weekends. And the kids just love that secret. Well, they demanded a performance and shared that secret. So just think of some secrets that you might have and make a list. Okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to choose one of the items on your list. And then I want you to write a sharing a secret lead. We're not going to write the whole piece, but we're just going to write the lead. Now, let me give you another example or two just to get you started. The idea of sharing a secret lead is you're going to, first of all, I'm going to ask you to write in the third person. So you're not going to say, most people know that you're going to say, you're going to write it as if it's for your kids. So most people know that Mr. or most people know that Mrs. and your or Ms. and your last name, she, her, right in the third person, he, him. So here, I'll give you an example. This is a fourth grader. Most people know, and I have his whole piece, and if I have time, I'll read this one too, but I'll read his lead. Most people know that Jordan simply adores dogs. He loves to play hockey, but most people do not know that at the age of 8, he knocked out his front two grown up teeth. So that was his secret. Or here's Amanda. Most people know Amanda is really good at gymnastics. They know that she loves cats and has a cat named Cupcake. However, many people would be surprised to learn that when Amanda was little, she ate mostly pickles. She loved them. So try to come up with a lead paragraph saying what most people know about you, a couple of things, two or three things, and then save your secret for the end. But most people don't know, or most people would be surprised to find out, or a secret about, and write your lead. Okay, how about if you finish up that sharing a secret lead and turn and share with somebody close to you? Find someone to share your sharing a secret lead with. running out of time, aren't we?
Oh, I can't hear you. But,
Oh,
well, we'll have to wrap it up in about 5 or 6.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, great. Thanks.
you're welcome. Okay, everybody, I'm going to call you back again. We are running out of time, but I did want to share with you the power of mentor text. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. I want to explain to you that the piece I'm going to share with you, Danny's piece as a third grader, the kids were studying about the pilgrims. It was November, and they were allowed to choose anything they wanted to write about to share a secret, something about anything they learned that had to do with the pilgrims. So this the conference I had with Danny was truly amazing because this is what he wrote. This was his lead. Almost everybody knows that the Mayflower was a sailing ship. Most people know that the Pilgrims came to America on the Mayflower. But do you want to know a secret? The Mayflower was not built to carry people. It was a cargo ship, and that was a good thing and a bad thing for the Pilgrims. Now, he did sharing a secret lead really well, but this good thing, bad thing, I was really interested in, particularly because he used it to develop the body of his piece. And this is a third grader. So I'm going to just summarize. He starts by saying the good thing was that the Mayflower carried barrels of wine. And then he explains that the wine barrels leaked a little bit and made the ship smell much better because in those days, ships smelled like garbage dumps. Then he says the bad thing in the next paragraph, the bad thing was that a cargo ship has no beds. The sailors had hammocks and the pilgrims had to sleep on the hard deck. There wasn't a lot of room, so with so many people in one space, it was very hard to breathe. And everything was really crowded. So he ends by saying, so now you know a secret about the famous sailing ship. The Mayflower was not made to carry people. It was a cargo ship, and that is the truth. Now I said to Danny, and he did such a great job. He did a wrap up conclusion. Um, this is in a third grade class where John Domenico is a wonderful writing teacher. He's taken a lot of courses with the writing project, and he has writing workshop every day. So I wasn't working miracles. The classroom teacher was a fabulous teacher and he used mentor text all the time and still does. But I said to Danny, this is just so great. This good thing, bad thing. And he looks at me and he goes, mentor text. I said, what? He says, wait. He goes to his desk, and I watch this kid. Oh my gosh. He's pulling things out of this desk, and he keeps pulling things, and it's cascading all over the floor. And he gets out this book that's slightly bent up called That's Good. No, That's Bad. Do you know it? I can't remember the author. I know I have a copy, but the premise of the book is it starts out and it says something and that's good. And then no, and then something else, but that's bad. So it kept going back and forth, a seesaw structure between no, that's good, no, that's bad. So from that book that he loved, he brought it up. It was crumpled, well worn. He said, this is the mentor text I used to write this piece. Well, I nearly fell off the chair because this is exactly what you want kids to do. Take that idea of mentorship, using books and authors, imitating them. And he had taken a book that was completely different from really the work he was doing. and he was asked to share a secret, which he did well. But then he scaffolded his entire piece around the good thing and the bad thing. And I just, when I get examples like that, and I do all the time, I'm always convinced that mentor texts really work with all of us because we learned everything by imitation, close imitation at first, and then we break away from it and we change it a little bit and we make it our own. And when we make it our own, then it really becomes one of our fingerprints. So I have loved the time I've spent with you. I only wish I could be right there in your class room in your institute right now with you, talking to you and sitting down next to you and having conversations. Please feel free to send me any questions. I know it's 11 o'clock and you have been sitting for a long time. You've been a great audience. I wish you all well and great success with your Writing Institute and all your future endeavors with teaching and with writing. Thanks for having me.
Um, Thanks, Lynn. We just all wanted to say how much we appreciate your time this morning and talking to us. And you're really a pro at commanding attention with Skype. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. And please don't hesitate to write or call. I would love to hear from all of you. You've been great and good luck to you. Thank you so much for having me. Take care, everybody. Bye. Bye bye.
Bye.